Dr. Beaber says it's better to be lucky than good. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam, and I've been living with multiple sclerosis for 38 and a half years. I recently watched Dr. Beaber's video, 10 Hot Takes About Multiple Sclerosis from a Neurologist. And of course, very interesting, but in particular, his last hot take, number 10. And I'm going to play that clip in its entirety because I agree with him in a sense, but I also feel like I ought to react to it a little bit, especially given the focus of my channel.
Number 10, it's better to be lucky than good. Although I talk a lot on this channel about lifestyle, nutrition, disease-modifying therapy, which I really do believe makes a difference, I still think it's better to just be lucky with multiple sclerosis because there's so much variation in the severity of the disease. And I have patients who have had MS for decades, have never taken disease-modifying therapy, don't keep any specific diet, and do extremely well. And I have other patients who seem to be making all the right choices and still have a lot of problems. Not to say that these things make no difference, but the variation in the natural history of the disease is so significant that it's ultimately better to just be lucky and have milder MS than anything I can do for you, at least in 2023. Maybe it will be different in the future.
Well, Dr. Beaber does admit that it doesn't hurt to do all the right things, but that in the long run, the course of our MS is so individualistic that it really does come down to almost what I guess he would call the luck of the draw. Part of the reason for saying that is, of course, that we don't totally understand what causes MS and why certain people seem to progress more quickly and more severely than others. But I guess for now we're going to call it luck. I don't know that it is. I just think that we just still need a lot of study and a lot of research. As I've said on this channel, I think we've been making some pretty good strides in understanding what might be behind some of what we thought was just the hand we were dealt. Exposure to Epstein-Barr virus might play into it. Other environmental factors might trigger whatever that genetic component is. In that sense, MS is no different from most other conditions that we get, like cancer. Some people can be exposed to the same environmental factors and not end up with cancer, and other people seem to get it pretty readily, even when those factors don't seem to be present. So we just don't know. One thing that I've been thinking about is, isn't everything in life a question of, I guess we'll call it luck? I don't know about that term. But isn't everything in life pretty much down to that? When you come into this world, you don't really have much control over how your genetics are going to line up in life. You don't know if you're going to be tall, if you're going to tend towards fat. You don't know what your hair color is going to be or your eye color. There's so many things that you don't really control. So in a sense, it all comes down to luck. And if you go back to Dr. Brandon Beaber's thesis that it's better to be lucky than good, I guess you could say it's better to win the lottery than it is to work hard all your life. That seems a little, I don't know, cynical almost to me. So maybe that's taking things to an extreme, but maybe not either. I think we need to be careful when we start thinking that being good doesn't really make all that much difference. Because even as Dr. Beaber admitted, it does make a lot of difference. It makes a difference in your overall quality of life all the way through. And that's true whether or not you end up in progressive MS or you stay in relapsing MS for years and years. Whether your MS symptoms just seem almost hardly noticeable, whether it impacts you every minute of every day. It's still a question of overall health, I believe, that keeps other conditions at bay so that you don't end up feeling lousy, not just because of MS, but because you're dealing with bad knees because you've been carrying around too much weight, or you've been smoking and your lungs aren't working like they should, or your diet is not good and you're not getting the nutrition you need. You're not taking care of problems that you could very easily be taken care of. So I know I sound kind of lectury on this, but I think it's important not to become discouraged when we think, oh, well, there's nothing I can do about my MS anyway, so why bother? And I know that wasn't Dr. Beaber's message, but I just want to reiterate that that isn't a profitable course for us to be taking. The other thing I want to mention about this idea of luck is that luck's all well and fine when you look at it retrospectively, and I think we all could probably give examples. Wasn't it lucky that the people who chose not to go to work on 9/11/2001 weren't in the building when the planes hit? And that's an extreme example, of course, but there's many times in our own lives where we think, oh, it's sure a good thing I did this instead of that, because think what would have happened. Or if we have a life partner that we love very much, we think of all the factors that could have kept us from ever meeting that person in the first place. Maybe we would have perhaps not moved to a certain city, or maybe we would have pursued a certain career or not. Maybe we would have gone to a certain event or not, and we would not have met the person that we're now going to be spending our lives with. I guess you might want to call that luck if you're so inclined. You might want to say that there were spiritual forces at work. In either case, you didn't know about it ahead of time. And so you can't live your life just assuming that luck is always going to control everything you do, and therefore you have so little control that your choices hardly matter. I know it's silly. Even as I say this, I think, well, this is ridiculous and nobody's going to be thinking that. But I guess it kind of needs to be said that we can control certain things in our lives at the moment, even though we might not be able to control luck, and we wouldn't even know what luck to wish for if we did control luck. Because that's the thing about luck, right? In the end, you look back and you say, oh, well, that's a good thing, the way things turned out. Or that was a terrible thing, the way things turned out. But we can't control that at any point along the way because we don't really know what the outcome is going to be. Okay, well, what then? What's the next thing that I thought about when I considered all this? Dr. Beaber's video, which would be appropriate since it's about MS and he's a neurologist, really focused on luck as it pertains to MS and being good as it pertains to MS. And okay, as far as that one small thing, he's right. But as far as your overall health, he's not. Because I don't think that your overall health is a matter of luck. I think your overall health is a matter of the sum of all the choices that you make every day for years. And that's how come you wind up in the position that you're in, either with generally good health or generally not so good health. And that is regardless of whether you have some kind of chronic condition that you didn't bring on yourself. We all can feel better or worse. So again, Dr. Beaber's remarks need to be put into their context because life is about more than multiple sclerosis. And even though my channel is about multiple sclerosis, if you've watched it at all, you know that it's about more than that. It's about how to live the best possible life, whether you have multiple sclerosis or not. A question that I ask myself, since we've been talking about luck as something that you only find out about at the end, I've been asking myself, if I had known back then in 1983 what I know now, would I have done something differently? And if so, what would it be? Well, of course, bear in mind that back then things were really, really different, both with the state of multiple sclerosis treatment options, of which there were almost none, and the state of technology. The things that we take for granted now weren't even in existence then. But let's just say that I had some inkling that these certain things were going to happen. What might I have done differently? Well, knowing that the internet was coming, I would be really happy because that would mean it would be easier for me to do all of the research that I do the looking into things, to keeping up with how certain medications are performing in clinical trials, what might be on the horizon, how are things going as far as determining a cure for MS, how to take care of the prevention side of things, how to perhaps make sure that people never even have to get MS in the first place. All of those things, I would be able to follow that from a very early time in the development of the state of the art in MS research. But, obviously that didn't happen. But the other thing I think I would do is try much harder to be consistent about diet and exercise. Now, I have changed the way I've eaten multiple times in my adult life. Not exactly following the fads, but listening to what some health experts have said about certain foods that are good, certain foods to try and minimize or avoid altogether. I did try to do that, but I listened to different experts as time went on, and so my eating has changed somewhat. I think overall, I would say I've probably been pretty good, but there were times when I wasn't as consistent as I probably should have been. And then as far as exercise, I do believe that that is an important factor in your overall health. And I haven't been the best about exercise over the course of my life. I'm more an indoor type person. I like to read. I like to socialize. I tend to like to do things that involve being indoors. But I did enjoy exercise very much in my 30s and even into my 40s. To the right here, I think it's to my left, but to your right on the screen in back of me, you can see this t-shirt that's on the top of a pile of t-shirts. And all of those are t-shirts from all of the runs that I used to do. It's called Bloomsday, and it happens in Spokane every year in the spring. It's so much fun. It's everything that I normally don't really like. It's big, big crowds. It's a lot of stuff that I normally wouldn't be getting into, but it was so much fun. And while I can't claim to have run the whole course between walking up the hills and running down the hills, I think the course is about 8 miles long. And I did the whole course every year for years and years. And so I have this big collection of t-shirts that I had been saving. Didn't want them to wear out. And recently I talked to a friend who does quilting and I asked her if I could have her put those together and make some kind of a lightweight, say summer weight sort of quilt out of them. And she said that she would be willing to do that, thankfully. So I think those t-shirts will end up having more of a life than they would have had if I was supposed to be wearing them. But as they relate to exercise, they are a good reminder to me of the importance of being physically active, and that does not necessarily mean running Bloomsday. The more I look into exercise, the more I realize that any movement is good movement. So whether you're tapping your toes or doing the dishes, those things all count. They're all important. And I guess finally, if we want to talk about things that some people would call luck, I'm lucky that I was born at all. We were talking earlier about all of the factors that could have kept us from meeting the person that we were going to spend our lives with. What about our parents? There were so many factors that might have kept them from meeting, falling in love, having children, that we might not be sitting here right now. I might not be making this video and you might not be watching it. But all those factors came together and poof, here we all are. Wow, isn't that pretty miraculous? And when you think about it, having had that miracle and getting the opportunity and the privilege to exist on this earth and to enjoy living, what more miracle could we reasonably ask for? Well, okay, before I get too deep and spiritual here, I guess I'll just say that's all I have for you today. I really look forward to any comments that you might have. Leave those below for me. I'm curious to know what you think about this whole thing about luck and being good, being smart, doing the right thing versus just letting fate take its course. But in the meantime, take really good care of yourself and I'll see you again in my next video.